This is Autoline This Week, the show that gets you inside the global automotive industry. Autoline This Week partnered with the Consulate General of Canada in Detroit to produce this episode.
Hi, I'm John McElroy, and welcome to Autoline This Week. Today, we're going to be talking about the Chinese market. As you know, it's grown to be the biggest car market in the world, roughly the size of the American and European markets put together. But have foreign automakers become a little too reliant on the Chinese market? That's what we're going to dive into today. And my two guests are Michael Dunne, the founder and CEO of ZoZo Go Consultancy, and also Tu Li, coming in from Beijing today. He's the head of Sino Auto Insights. Again, very insightful observations of what's going on in the Chinese market and elsewhere. And Mike and Tu, great to have the both of you here.
John, thanks for having us.
Terrific to be with you, John.
So, Tu, I'm going to throw it out to you just to get the conversation going. Have foreign automakers become too reliant on the Chinese market?
I think one in particular has. I think Volkswagen has been here almost 40 years, and they have made China their cash cow. 50% of their profits come out of China, but they haven't been able to press reset on the EV sector, because right now the ICE sector, or the petrol vehicles, are on a downturn, and EVs are growing like crazy. Just last week, BYD announced that they're going to stop making ICE vehicles full stop and focusing straight on EVs. And so one company is very, very, very reliant on the China EV sector, or the China sector. But I think more would want to be, because it's the only growing major market in the world. So,
Mike, how do you see it? Have foreign automakers become too reliant on the Chinese market?
John, I have a slightly different take on it. I feel as though for global auto brands, especially mass market brands, the sun is setting quickly in China. The party's over. The days of record growth and profits are no longer. And for many global brands, with a couple of exceptions, their days are actually numbered in China. If you look at sales of GM, Ford, Chrysler, our Detroit boys, they're down between 30 and 60% from their peak. Likewise with profits. So it's getting increasingly difficult to compete in China and make money from there. So the only thing worse than being too reliant on the China market is not being needed anymore in the China market. And that's the reality, I think, that several global automakers today face.
So what's changed? Why have GM, Ford, even Volkswagen come down from the high spot that they were in 4 or 5 years ago?
Right. It looks like, if you look at it from a consumer's point of view, in the early days, like the 90s and the 2000s, when Chinese started to buy cars in big numbers, consumers cared about two things. One was reliability. That really played to Volkswagen. Oh, the German quality is very good. 质量好. And then the other thing was prestige. Oh, I've got an American Buick I can show my friends. This is fantastic. And in the early days, Chinese brands didn't offer either one. Today, Chinese brands like BYD, Great Wall, Geely, and others really are delivering high quality vehicles at affordable prices. So that leaves only like the prestige factor that's available to global brands. And this is one of the reasons why Audi, Mercedes, and BMW continue to sell in record numbers there. That's sort of the safe space. But your big middle ground is being eaten up by the Chinese, as Chinese consumers go increasingly to Chinese brands.
Tu, what makes the mid-market Chinese brand so good right now? What sets them apart or makes them equally competitive to their foreign counterparts?
Well, I think Mike brings up a really great point, because the design and the quality and the reliability has really caught up. Over the last 25, 30 years, they have learned from their joint venture partners. And then also, the Chinese market has really evolved from a feature standpoint, from a need standpoint. So Mike had talked about reliability and so quality is great from the foreign automakers. But now the two features that most Chinese consumers want are going to be safety, and they're going to want connectivity.
Connectivity, you're right too.
The Chinese automakers are really able to lean into that stuff. Now, will it export to Europe and the United States? That remains to be seen. But we have to remember that a Cadillac owner in China is on average probably about 20 years younger than a Cadillac owner in the United States or an Audi owner in Germany. And so that market is much more dynamic. They're more digitally native. And so I think the Chinese, even the SOEs, are able to bring more features that are going to resonate with that target market better than the foreign automakers.
And I'll just interject for those who don't know, state-owned enterprises. The government-owned car companies is what you're referring to there in SOE. And
that's right.
Let's get into that. Talk to me about the SOEs, the state-owned, the government-owned car companies versus the independents, because up to now, every example that you've given me has been the independents, not the government-owned ones.
Yeah, so technically there's three independent. I mean, they lean heavily on their provincial governments for support. So that would be Geely, Great Wall, and BYD. And they're actually very dynamic holding companies that have multiple brands. BYD being the exception, because Great Wall has 4 or 5 different brands, and they really specialize on the SUV segment. Although they do have a brand new EV brand that's supposed to be focused on women. And then there's the SOE, so SAIC, which has joint ventures with General Motors and Volkswagen. So they're typically known as the best run SOE. And then there are more of the regional ones, FAW, First Auto, and GAC, which has joint ventures with Jeep. And I know I'm missing 1 or 2, BAC, so there's Beijing Automotive, but they're, with the exception of an SAIC and a few of the other ones, they're much more focused on fleet and the lower end of the market. The joint ventures allow them to build cars that are going to have some cachet with the more upscale market here in China.
But are the SOEs, it seems to me the more independent ones are the more dynamic companies, the ones that are really moving the needle, especially when you come to the EV startups. Or do I have that wrong? Are the government-owned ones equally as dynamic?
No, I think you're absolutely right, because Geely, they're actually owning, they own Volvo, they own Polestar, they own Lotus. And so they're looking to become all 3 of the independents are looking to go international very quickly. Great Wall has bid on a factory in Spain. They're also looking at a factory in Brazil. And then Geely is looking to export Lotus. They just launched a new SUV from Lotus that they're looking to sell internationally. And so all 3 of those companies have grand ambitions to be global very quickly, more so than the SOEs. So,
yeah. So, Mike, what do you think? If you had your money to invest, SOE or independent?
Oh, that's a great question. So one of the ways to think about it is 3 chapters. So in the beginning, China's ambition has always been to build a world-class auto industry, like in Japan, like in Germany, the United States. So how do you get there? First phase, the state enterprises form these joint ventures with global automakers, the Toyotas, Hondas, Volkswagens, Mercedes, all over the country. And to a large extent, the state enterprises thrived because of the profits they made by building and selling these global brands. But where was the Chinese brand? Here comes along these 3 independents, Geely, Great Wall, and BYD. An improvement over the state enterprises, but still not really world-class in terms of technology and innovation. Today, we see the emergence of handfuls of really impressive new EV startups like NIO and XPeng and Li Auto. I know, too, you mentioned you had just driven the Li Auto product recently. Those are really genuinely world-class vehicles, including autonomous features, electrification, the range, the connectivity, it's all there. And you start to see, well, where would I put my bets in terms of competitiveness? These new EV startups look really attractive, and they enjoy the full support of policymakers in Beijing who are finally saying, we finally have cars to be proud of. We can export them to Europe. People want these cars. So that's sort of where my bets would go. The more tech-advanced, tech-oriented, software-driven companies we're seeing just a rise now.
So, too, how worried should foreign automakers be, especially the luxury brands, the Germans? I guess you could throw Lexus and Cadillac in there as well. How worried should they be about this upsurge of very competitive electric cars coming out of China, premium electric cars?
So I've sat in a few Neos. I've sat in some Xpongs, some WMs, I just drove a Li Auto, a Li 1 for about a week last week. And I'm originally from Detroit, as you guys know. So my first job was at Orient Assembly. So I'm steeped in the whole how the door should sound when it slams, the fit finish, how everything should kind of fit together and the fitment of everything. And I got to say, a week with that Li 1, I was completely impressed. The door sound was about right. It's a heavy car and a larger car, but the panel gaps were correct, and the steering was light but responsive. And so to top it off, it was less than 400,000 RMB, which is less than $60,000 for a full size SUV that's going to compete directly against an X5. And so I have not been able to drive the new Neo ET7, the premium sedan that's about the size of a Model S. But, China Twitter and Neo is a global brand because foreigners can buy its ADRs. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of investors are looking at Neo to be kind of sort of the next Tesla. And so the ET7 has gotten a ton of positive press. And if I was BMW and with the 5 Series, I'd be pretty worried because it's a sharp looking car. If you haven't seen it, just Google Neo ET7. I think you're going to be pretty impressed. So,
yeah, Mike, let's get your input on this because that's what the topic of today's show is. Is there an over-reliance on the Chinese market? And if the German brands particularly, I don't want to just single them out, but they are so reliant on the Chinese market, do they have the chance of losing all that as the industry converts to electric?
They definitely have an eye on what happened here in California as Tesla took chunks of share away from BMW to start with, and Mercedes and Audi. So they say, oh, that's definitely a possibility in China, our most lucrative market. So they're concerned for sure. Just to relate a recent conversation, I was talking to a very senior executive at Mercedes-Benz who recently left Mercedes after working there for many years. And I asked him about the Neo products. And he said, the best in the world. Best in the world. That was a shocker to me. Not almost as good as us, but right there and even better in some respects. So for people who want to get their mind around, like, how good are these cars? You've got seasoned executives saying these are the real deal. Yeah.
And if you let me interject, John, for a second, these are EV first companies, number one. So the design is, in mind for, a battery pack that, fits the platform. And then number two, 65% of their employees are software developers. Okay. So they're going to be right there with the Teslas. Now, Tesla has a lot more experience and is a bit more vertically integrated when you look at their software hardware stack. But for a Neo that's been around since 2017, it's still pretty impressive what they're able to accomplish and what they've been able to put on the road. And their features are very, very, very technology forward, as opposed to a Volkswagen, who I would argue that the ID series technology features aren't even up to par to anything that's pretty typical in China.
Well, that's a real problem for Volkswagen, right? I mean, the ID4 is really not selling in the numbers that Volkswagen needs it to be selling in China, or the United States or Europe for that matter, too. But, we're focused on China right now here. Can they turn that around? Or can they turn it around with the ID4, number one? Can they do updates, or do they need something altogether new there?
Well, this is the conundrum because they introduced 3 models, but it's 5 models because they have 2 joint ventures, right? And so they have one ID3, they have 2 ID4s, one from FAW and one from SAIC, and 2 ID6s. And to combine, those 5 products sold 70,000 units in 2021. They were originally forecast to sell between 80 and 100. And what we're probably going to end up seeing is them doing a quick mid-cycle enhancement to refresh some of the features on these vehicles, because so Volkswagen had another problem, their retail strategy, right? Because they have all these dealers and they try to open retail stores. And so I think that confused consumers as well. But, I don't see them, they're talking about hitting 150, 160,000 units this year, combined with the challenges for the China market and supply chain and COVID. I don't know how they get to that number, but you never know. And on top of that, they don't launch a new vehicle this year. Volkswagen brand doesn't. So it just needs to sit out there for a second. But what do you think, Mike?
Yeah, dude, you mentioned connectivity. And this is where I think the Chinese are really separating themselves from the globals, in particular Volkswagen. So consumers I've talked to in China who've bought the ID4 are really disappointed with the whole infotainment systems, calling it slow, awkward, not intuitive. If you look at the top 10 electric vehicle sales models in China last year, 9 of them were Chinese. Tesla alone was the only one to be able to crack the top 10. That's a real leading indicator of just how important it is for VW and other global automakers to up their game in connectivity. There's an association, VW reliable, good quality, solid, but oh my goodness, what happened to them on the software front? This is an urgent matter for VW.
Is it just VW? What about like General Motors, for example, which is also seeing a big drop in sales in China and profit too?
So we'll see how it turns out with the Lyric, because the Lyric,
the Cadillac, right?
Yeah, the Cadillac Lyric, which is supposed to launch manufacturing in Shanghai later this year. I've been told that reservations are pretty robust, and if they can get production started and momentum built pretty quickly, which is going to be pretty challenging in this environment, then maybe they can build some solid momentum, because they're also Cadillac is also looking to launch that Halo sedan, I think the Celestiq or something like that. I think it's right. And I think that's going to be chock full of technology. So, but I think there's a fine balance. It doesn't need to be bleeding edge, because I think the Mach-E was doing well on reservations. Their challenge here, at least, was execution, because BYD couldn't get them batteries fast enough. And so they had to delay launch, which really, really took away a lot of that momentum that they had when they launched the vehicle last April at the Shanghai Auto Show, or Ford launched it last April. So a lot of different things going on. And I think what we're seeing here is just the number of announcements coming at you fast and furious all the time from automakers. And so in order to keep up, you got to be doing something, you got to be showing something off. And I don't think Europe or the United States is used to any type of the velocity at which things happen here. So,
right. So Mike, this doesn't sound good. The foreign automakers behind on electrics, behind on connectivity, and those are the 2 hottest things in the Chinese market. The future doesn't look bright.
Right. For foreign automakers, I think the playbook is you have to move up or get seen to the door. It's like, do you offer prestige, Mercedes or BMW or Audi or Cadillac? Now, one of the knock-on effects of this, of course, Cadillac's doing okay, pretty well in China, and with the Lyric it should do even better. But there is consequences. So Buick, which used to be considered prestigious, is now really kind of milquetoast, middle of the road, and its sales have decreased. Even worse, Chevy, which used to be the sort of mid-market brand, is going down fast. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Chevy leave the market in the next couple of years. That's how intense the competition is. And if you're not moving up, you might be moving out. Can
any of these electric startups really make money? I mean, you've got, Xpeng, you've got Li Auto, you've got NIO, you've got Hozon, you've got a number of others. They're all selling in the 10 to 15,000 cars a month. And none of them seem to be able to break out from the other. It's still early days. There's a lot of up and down month to month and the like. But I mean, even as good as these car companies are, isn't there a danger that they've just sliced the pie a little too thinly for any of them to really make money?
Yeah, so we have to look at some of these car companies a little bit differently, because the Hozons or the Nettas and some of these car companies that you had just mentioned, they're going to be more mass market and very much domestically focused, right? So if we take a handful, NIO, Xpeng, Li Auto, Zeekr, so NIO and Zeekr and Xpeng to a lesser extent, Li Auto, they're all going to be premium, not luxury, but premium. Okay, but then Xpeng, they're going to be more mass market, right? Because they're less than 250, 300,000 RMB, so less than $40,000. So when you say 15,000, what we should see is an Xpeng start to move away and get more volume as the P5 ramps, as the G9. So they're launching a new SUV called the G9. It's good looking SUV. It was supposed to be shown at the auto show here in April, but they delayed it. And so we'll have to wait and see and kick the tires a little bit later this year. But, NIO is going to be launching 3 cars this year. And so we should also see a little bit of separation. So these car companies, we have to remember that most of them only have 1, 2, 3 products. And I think once the product portfolio matures a little bit, then we should see a better mature strategy from them as to how they're going to really separate themselves from everyone else. And the one thing I do want to let you guys know is that right now in the premium segment, there's really only a couple of EV companies domestically in China, right? There's NIO and there's Li Auto, but there's still 2 or 3 more that are in stealth that are going to be launching in the next 18, 20 months. BYD is going to be launching a premium brand. And so the foreign automakers, as Mike had mentioned, they still have an opportunity to grab that share. But the e-trons, what's happening with them is that they're pricing their electric vehicles extremely high for the China market. And so the Chinese EV companies are undercutting them. And the digital natives, one thing that's very important about the digital natives, they actually embrace Chinese domestic brands where their parents shunned them, right? And so I think that's another major difference that needs to be kind of spoken about.
John, I think maybe another way to think about your question is, where do we put, if we're going to take the money from the 529 accounts for our kids, where should we place that money if we're feeling lucky? BYD strong, NIO, Xpeng, those would be my top 3. Then I think the founder of Li Auto, Li Xiang, he himself said 1 in 100 of these companies will survive. And it may or may not be my own company. So they're realistic. Look for 3 to 5 years from now, just those handful to be still marching on.
And we have to remember that Baidu is launching a car, Xiaomi is launching a car. And so the competition hasn't really subsided. It's just it's going to be next gen EV startups. So the first gen we're seeing already, and then next gen who are actually going to be more technologically advanced because they're coming from the technology companies, right? So a lot of different features, a lot of different design likely. So
to pick up on that point, this is, John, if I could just jump in, I think this is really important for global automakers to understand. So up until now, the playbook for state enterprise was we'll partner with the globals in order to secure that technology, and then we'll build our own cars. Now they're seeing, wait a second, we can go to our own backyard and hook up with technology companies. They'll be the ones to feed us connectivity and electrification and batteries. What do we need the global brands for anymore? That's a huge change in the makeup of China's auto industry, the emergence of these big tech companies entering the auto industry.
So we're down to the last minute and a half here. But so too, real quickly, China's encouraging more foreign investment, actually, and foreign automakers are able to form joint ventures where they own a majority. Heretofore, they could not do that. Tesla, of course, owns its own thing. If you were a foreign investor, would you take advantage of this? Would you put more money into the Chinese market?
I think I might, because it's still going to grow, right? And so I think if I'm comparing to other markets, then maybe yes, right? From an absolute standpoint, there's still probably some profits to wring out of the China market if I'm confident in my product portfolio.
Okay, and right? I got to get Michael in.
Sorry.
Real quick, go ahead, Mike. Would you invest more as a foreign automaker now in China?
If it means I can control my business with a majority ownership, yes. But I'd also be realistic. It doesn't mean I invest and I start making money. I invest as the ticket, the access to the market. Now I got to get to work. Connectivity, electrification.
Wow, this is very interesting. 5 years ago, everybody thought that the sales and profits would just continue to roll in forever and ever in China, and nobody seemed to count on the Chinese getting to be so competitive. Very fascinating discussion here. Michael Dunne from ZoZo Go, Tu Lee from Sino Auto Insights. I really appreciate your insights and your time today.
Thank you so much for having us, John.
Yeah, thanks,
you.
John.
Autoline This Week partnered with the Consulate General of Canada in Detroit to produce this episode.